There is no dearth of business associations in the country. Many of them have in fact existed for last several decades and have made positive contribution to their respective spheres. But none can really claim to have made as deep an impact as NASSCOM, the apex body of Indian software industry. Harish Mehta, the founder chairman of NASSCOM, has recently written a book called The Maverick Effect. The most defining element of this book is it talks about how Indian IT firms collaborated, they joined hands and helped India becoming an IT superpower. Today we have with us Mr. Harish Mehta to share more interesting insights from the book. So Mr. Mehta, just as I was telling you before the camera rolled that it's quite difficult for a guy like me with very limited macro understanding of different domains to speak with somebody like you who has just written such a wonderful book talking about how NASSCOM evolved and how the big ticket push it gave to the Indian IT industry. As you have mentioned, Indian IT industry export was probably something like $54 million around 88, 89 before NASSCOM was formed. Now it is close to $250 billion. I would just like to understand the book. When you chose to write the book on this topic, why this title, The Maverick Effect? Is it because you are talking about a bunch of people who came together and who were crazy and who were mad, who had this big picture in their mind that we have to do something very, very big? What is the reason behind this title?
What you say is partly right in terms of title, but if you see this book, each strand represents one entrepreneur, let's say, and it is all of them together working. So the big difference between people coming together is a very common thing anywhere, and having an ambition also is reasonably, everyone would have that. But who can convert that vision into reality? Especially when you go from $50 million you talk to $250 billion and going strong. And within that there are so many other parameters, we can talk about it later. So the key difference, and probably it is an unusual business model or way of working in the world, is that these tough competitors came together, not only came together while taking an industry decision about whatever the issue is, they kept India first and their personal interests second. It's very unusual. You compromise the short-term benefits for a long-term benefit.
You have used a specific term. It was not competition, it was Coopetition. Something like that you have used.
Yeah, absolutely. See, when we started NASSCOM, there was a time in the 80s where the sunrise industries were hardware industry. Or the sunrise industry in a software arena was software product business, not software services. Software services was classified as a techno-coolie, cyber coolie, washing the diapers of Fortune 500, very low-end, dirty work to be done. So it was not a so-called respectable business. And for us as an association to focus on tech services business, which grew to such an extent, that is where the differentiator comes in. For example, a person like me who came from USA to India, I had worked in USA and I was getting paid X money. I could do the same work sitting in Bombay in a cubicle. All I needed was an access to a pipe, communication pipe to my customer in USA, accessing those computers. I can use my talent to do that work. But I was getting paid 15 times less. So the labor arbitrage benefit was very apparent to all of us. But how do you convert that into business opportunity? Now, since services is not classified as a business, plus software is intangible, you cannot touch, feel, there is no physicality to the software. So all the rules of physical world were applied to software. So we had hundreds of regulations, I call it strangulating the growth of services industry. And so we came together to see that all these regulations can be removed. But now to do that, number of steps that we took, which is very unique now when you look back in the hindsight. At that time we did it very naturally. Things like we'll build trust between us and the policy makers. We will not bribe any policy maker for any policy change, in spite of hundreds of regulations blocking our growth. And so like that, we took number of such decisions, and then we built trust with the policy makers. A simple thing we started with, for example, in our meeting, in those days, bureaucrats didn't trust us as a businessman. They were still suffering from colonial mindset that business people are greedy and they'll sell the country and X, Y, and Z. So they won't trust you. And as a result, they'll take decisions sitting in their own ivory towers, as I would call it. So we said, you come and attend our meetings without any invitation. And it was an open invitation to any bureaucrat, any department, any ministry.
Okay.
They said, well, we will come and listen to you guys and listen to your problems. Because other industry associations were probably hiding it from them. They're only asking for benefits, incentives and whatnot. And here we are saying, now you come. We said, now you come and listen to our problem. Then you'll be able to solve problem together. Because this is something, there's no role model for anyone to follow. So that started building a trust between us and the policy maker. It culminated to a point where Mr. Vittal, he came in as in those days, DOE or current MATI secretary. Now in those days, secretaries were like God to industry. Because every needle you want to import, you have to go to them for license. And if you're not in good books with them, you are out. Your business will suffer. So in that sense, we had to really follow very, you can say, subtly, strongly, whatever they do and whatnot. So when we wanted software export benefit to be extended to our industry, we approached him and we had told him all these regulations of our industry suffering. So he came back one day and said, yes, we can give you software export benefit, provided we were at 150 million at that time in 91. You can do $400 million by the end of the year. So we looked at it, studied it internally, and we could not come up more than 200 million. Now before, when we formed NASSCOM, we had taken that another decision at that time, that we should represent 75 to 80% top line of the industry. So at that time, in the original days, TCS was not yet ready to join NASSCOM. So we delayed forming NASSCOM till TCS said yes. Only after Mr. Kohli said yes, we started NASSCOM as an association. Now, so here we looked at all of us and we said we can only do $200 million. So at that time I was the chairperson of NASSCOM. I went back to Mr. Vittal and said, Vittal sir, not possible. You don't want the benefit. Then I said, we want the benefit, but not by misleading or cheating, giving some numbers which are not doable. Here is what we all said together, and our number is $200 million. He said, but here is another association, their proposal with us. They said they can do it. And so they had given some proposals, give a Reserve Bank should give a loan to every engineer, and then something they had given. Then the Software Export Promotion Council, they also had given a proposal that it can be done. And they said, why you can't do it? So at that point, what we had decided, 80% of the voice we represent, those players' names I gave it to Mr. Vittal. So these players can't do it. If they have some other software companies who can do it, please go ahead and do that. He realized the difference between us and others. And he said, this is an association, we started building trust basically. He said, now give me all your regulations. He said, give me 3 top regulations blocking you. So that time also, now in the hindsight looks funny, but we told him, Mr. we will not give you any. You only give us one commitment. He said, what? We said, you will consult us whenever you make any change in any policy where the word software is. It's only consult you, not accept your recommendation. We said, yeah, this is good enough for us. Still some bureaucrats argued, why should we listen to the private sector? He said, but they're only saying consult them. And anyway, we don't understand much about software and the complexities of software services business. So it's good for us if we learn in the beginning what all the different angles are. And the sovereign right of taking the final decision is still yours. So why not? So that's how we started.
How many primary members you had at the initial stage, and if you could just take me through to, very briefly take me through to how it grew in its first 5 years?
See, when I went around the country at that point in time, and there were about 40 companies who were in software services business.
Okay.
At that time, we had worked out a certain vision for the industry, which we talked to everybody. Okay, this is what our vision for our association is. Of course, one big differentiation was, again, we didn't only look at doing lobbying work. We said we'll develop the ecosystem. So being in technology world, we know there are challenges on the, let's say, supply side. You need a trained resource to work and do software services. If you don't have a resource, how do you do the software development work for the customer? But if you don't teach software, how are you going to get the raw material? So we knew that there are lots of challenges on the supply side, which we need to work on. So we said we'll work on the entire ecosystem. And everybody bought that vision. And so 40 of us came together and formed NASSCOM in 1988.
In early 90s, reforms gave the guys out there to, the ability to really dream big.
Absolutely, correct. Yeah. That was the first time, but our industry could convert that into real numbers.
And then you got late Mr. Devang Mehta as the president of NASSCOM in early 90s.
When we recruited him, he was 29 years old. And but one of the reasons we recruited him partly was his passion for India, his patriotism, in a sense that a year before, when I met him, like sitting across the table, and he was reading a newspaper, and suddenly there were tears in his eyes. I said, Devang, why there are tears in your eyes? He says in Gujarati, tells me, Apado desh kyare sudharse? When will our country change? I said, why? Some corruption issue was on the front page of the newspaper. So I could see that his blood was boiling, seeing the problems around it. So when we were looking for someone to run NASSCOM, we had one person, then we wanted to change over to another person. So that time, I thought of Devang to join us. But he had a very excellent job at Orissa Cement. He said, why should I give up cushy job and join a non-profit startup some ways? And but I say, if your passion is to help contribute to change India, here is a platform. This is our vision. We are good salespeople anyway. So we sold him the vision of NASSCOM or in the IT industry or services industry to him. And then he joined, and then superb. I mean, how he converted whole, you can say, the brand of India, motivated policymakers to change policies, motivated youngsters to join software industry. Number of ways he contributed.
Apart from Devang, if I ask you to name other prominent people who really contributed in making NASSCOM a big success story, or Indian IT sector big.
That's why I call it Maverick Effect. Yeah. I will not name one individual in that sense, because everyone has contributed. Okay. And there are lots of stories in the book where I talked about certain examples more, but there are many examples not even in the book. So I say the log aate gaye, karwa banta gaya. And today also continuously people are contributing. Just 3 days back, NASSCOM released responsible AI development guidelines. Now again, these guidelines were developed by globally fierce competitors sitting together. So that spirit was inculcated 30 years back. The competitors to work together on a NASSCOM as a platform. We built NASSCOM as a platform which is an independent, neutral, transparent platform where companies feel comfortable in contributing.
Now, reading your book, at many places you would feel as if you are talking about a bunch of players who are playing for different state teams in the Ranji Trophy, and when it comes to playing test matches, all of them are coming together, becoming Team India.
Absolutely. And it reached a stage when once China decided to compete with India, or at least build their own technology services industry. Because they saw our industry creating jobs, earning foreign exchange, bringing in cultural change through massive changes. We started planting seeds everywhere. So why not us? We are also lower cost. We also have intellectual people. We can also compete with India. Not only compete, we can go ahead of India. So they appointed Foresters as an agency, one very famous agency in those days, to come up with a master plan, what China should be doing.
Was it 90s?
Yeah, mid-90s.
Okay.
So then, John McCarthy, who was the CEO, he told us the story. That he told them very clearly that you cannot compete with India till you create NASSCOM equivalent organization. So what is so unique about NASSCOM? Another association. He said, no, I have not seen anywhere in the world fierce competitors, IBM, Accenture, Capgemini, TCS, Wipro, Infosys, Genpact, small companies all sitting around a table looking at an industry problem and solving it. With that sort of collaborative spirit and thinking at an aggregate level, not at a company level, is a unique combination, very difficult to beat.
There is a specific question which I would like to ask you. Of course, we all know the contribution which NASSCOM made. When it comes to Indian IT industry, and now we are now living in a digital era, which has been, and where things have been expedited by this pandemic, we have to adopt it very fast. How things are really moving in the Indian IT space? What is the next big frontier?
I have seen India changing from a snake charmer's country to a global tech powerhouse. So I'm an optimist, I'm a techno-optimist. We have built a culture now, the DNA, so that drives it. Whether we are there or not there, I don't think it's we can always play our role, I'm not denying it. But the book is there where all the principles are laid out reasonably well. So the people are smart to read through it and follow that model. As I just talked about AI guidelines. So it's partly similarly that came out because of that. Not only that, every decision by and large is where all competitors sit together, what we call executive council, who are elected, and they take the business world forward. So from a technology perspective, in my view, India has become an unstoppable engine now.
Okay.
We have 5.3 million engineers who are trained on almost all advanced technologies of the world. You name it. Whether you talk generative AI as a current, or you talk about virtual reality or metaverse, or you talk about all that. And the newer field comes, will absorb it very quickly. We have a very large educational network which quickly learn and then start teaching and training and bringing out. So I think that engine is running very well now. Now we need entrepreneurs who can take these individuals or different skills, and the technology is still, from our perspective, it's a lightning which is bottled. Entrepreneurs have to figure out a way, putting it together to solve a problem. How do you take the technology out? It's bottled up. So multiple technologies coming together, from biotech to health, you name it, will together come and solve a problem. So whether it is poverty, health tech, education, clean tech, all these problems are now within our realm, I can say, of solving it.
Okay.
You want the lowest cost satellite in 3 years, there are at least 5 companies in India working on it.
Absolutely. Yes.
You want militarized drones, again there will be another 20 companies in India working on it. May not be as advanced as today USA or China, but they all have started. Where the gap was 20 years has now been brought down to, maybe in some cases we are ahead, in some cases maybe still 10 years behind, depending on various skill set. But you can say, as long as we let this animal spirit of entrepreneurship flourish, we are in a very good shape.
This is my last point with you, Mr. Mehta. You were the founder chairman of this association, and hypothetically speaking, if you have to redo it again, if you have to form an association of similar kind, what is that one thing which you would like to do, which you may not have done when
Listen, change, whatever we did has changed the fortunes of billion people.
Yeah.
I can't complain about
Okay.
what has happened and how. Yes, I can always find few things
yeah.
here and there, but I don't know. Because it is the chemistry that works every time with different players, different ways, and you keep aiming at it and then keep doing it. And maybe have a vision for 3 years clarity, but not beyond. then we just move in that direction.
Sure.
But one message, if you want me to give
Yeah.
to youngsters, would be, I call it a triple E message, which is energy, ecosystem, and the third E is exponential.
Okay.
What it means is that as a young person, you're young, whoever, entrepreneur, intrapreneur, whatever you call it, 10% of your time, your energy, not money, at the peak of your career, you should spend growing your ecosystem around you exponentially. So 10% of your energy, invest for the ecosystem, growing ecosystem exponentially. Now, take example of NASSCOM. We all young, our industry, we delivered. In those days, everybody was contributing dramatically for NASSCOM, which is non-profit.
Yeah.
So in a sense, you can say it's a non-profit. But then we were spending time on the ecosystem, in a sense that at one point we wrote the draft policies of 20 states, IT policies. Now, so when the next technology wave came of opportunity, we had from 20 states raw material available to leverage. So you grow the ecosystem exponentially. Then the benefit is to everybody. So not only you grow, but also allow new ones to take birth. So triple E would be my message as a one message if I were to give.
Mr. Mehta, thank you so much for your time for this interview, and I hope this book reaches to as many people as possible, and there should be entrepreneurs out there who could really find it worth emulating in what they tend to do in their lives. Thank you.
Thank you.